Okay, so I guess we're just not going to do our timer. Hi, everyone. My name is Jasmine. This is Daughters of Qayin. I'm one of the hosts of our show. Um, you know, if you're new to my channel, we do mostly content on witchcraft related things, lots of vlogging. Yeah, so I'll let the other people like introduce themselves, and then we're going to get into our topic, which is going to be discussing our heavenly virtues.
Hi, everybody. I'm your terminally delightful co-host, Australia. Hope everybody's doing good today.
I'm here from my channel, Tata Kennedy, and yeah, I'm really excited to do this. And Jasmine, Australia, thank you so much for having me. And can I just say, whatever was going on in that intro piece with the horned dude in the broken down tower, I want to hang out with him.
I love it. It's kind of like cringe in a fun way.
But like, I'm like, literally, I'm like, that's like my dream right there. Just
Canva.
Just
Hell of a
hanging out
drug.
with the devil, you know?
Yeah, with the devil man.
So for those of you kind of just like tuning into this, who might not be familiar, we are doing a Witch's Black Lent, which I think we're in week 2 of that now, I think. So just to kind of sum up a little bit for you guys, the Witch's Black Lent is kind of us just subverting the Catholic Lent and making it serve us as witches. And the point of the Black Lent, to reiterate that too, is it's not so much like, you know, you're working on your sin. I know that I've seen some people post on like Instagram, Facebook and whatnot, TikTok, and like I know that some people have chosen to work, you know, oh, I struggle with this particular sin, so I'm working on overcoming that or finding solutions. That's the opposite of what we're all encouraging you guys to do. I mean, you can definitely interpret the challenge however you want to interpret it. And I'm not here to necessarily tell you like how to practice or anything. But for this particular challenge, if you're going to be partaking in the Black Lent, you want to be working with your chosen sin to basically better your life through apotheosis, self-development. So yeah, you want to be working with the sin. It was brought...
You gotta like embrace it, the sin and like revel in it and figure out how it can like actually benefit your life.
Yeah.
Instead of being like held down by the patriarchy.
Well, and all three of us are working with different sins. So maybe at some point in the stream, we can talk about our musings of our sin. Taya, you uploaded that really great video. I don't know if that was today or yesterday, but I remember watching some of it and it was very good. Very good stuff. So make sure to go check out Taya's sloth video. There's some good like history bits and stuff in there too, which maybe we'll talk a little bit of that in this video also. But so today's focus, since Beanbag Hagwag and I already kind of went through all of the 7 sins and talked about, you know, using how you can use some of these for good purposes, I figured we would talk about and really focus in on the 7 heavenly virtues, which directly sort of correspond to the 7 deadly sins and are kind of, I think, almost like a prescription. Like it's almost being like given to you as like, dealing with wrath, you should work with this heavenly virtue, or dealing with envy, you should work with this heavenly virtue. So where do we want to start with that? That's our main focus, you guys, of this stream tonight. And also, too, if you have questions about Black Lent or you want to share how you're working with your chosen sin or what you think of these heavenly virtues, definitely let us know below. So.
Well, I think that the virtues are just as oppressive as the sins, right? Like they make the sins out to be what's oppressive, but I think it's really the virtues that are oppressive, right? Don't have pride. Don't be proud of yourself. Have humility, right? But why can't I be proud of what I've accomplished in my life? And that brings people strength and confidence and the ability to stand on their, to be proud of themselves and stand on their feet and be like, yes, I am who I am. And that's, I think, what they're wanting to counteract, right? Have humility, know your place.
I think you kind of like hit the nail on the head in your video too, when you were talking about like the patriarchy as a whole and like this whole bit of like the 7 deadly sins and the heavenly virtues really kind of being tools to oppress people and gaslight people.
Big time. I mean, all of them all of them basically go back to be happy with your lot in life, right? If you go back to, how did I put it? If you go back to like the poor and the disenfranchised, right? And they're working for their like wealthy overmasters, and the wealthy overmasters who are Christian, who are the patriarchy, and ultimately who are, you know, the basis of capitalism, are sitting there and going, right, don't have pride, don't think so highly of yourself, know your place. Don't be greedy, don't accumulate wealth and material possessions. That's not good. We don't want you to own anything. Don't be wrathful, because what do wrathful people do? They band together and rise up. So don't be wrathful, you know, don't be angry with your lot in your life. Don't take pleasure in your life. Like, it's all about putting people in their place and trying to keep and control them there. Right? Don't be slothful. You need to be diligent. You need to work harder to be a better producer. Just because it'll make you a good person, not because it's going to make me all kinds of money, because it'll make you a better person.
Well, and I think probably a lot of us like can really relate to the burden of diligence, like especially in our capitalistic produce sort of like society. I was, you know, talking with I know that one night, Taya, we were kind of talking and I was saying how like for me, I feel like there's a lot of times for my mental health where instead of actually like working on something and like unpacking it, I'll just give myself 50 different projects, because then I can be like, look at what I performed and what I did and like how worthy that is. Like it's almost like a subconscious thing of like, you know, I have all these doing all these achievements or all these things or producing all this whatever, and it's like I don't have to focus on the other stuff because I'm being super diligent and hardworking, and that's what really matters.
Yeah, I think especially sloth, that idea of sloth and diligence is the foundation of capitalism. It is again, like I pulled it's an article, but it's actually a book written by Devin Price, PhD, and he wrote a book called Laziness Does Not Exist. And in it, he actually writes about the history of this idea of sloth and laziness and how it came in with the Puritans and spread to the rest of the sort of colonialists who were looking for a reason to justify slavery and enslaving people. And it turned into this whole, it was basically the basis of capitalism in America. And I was like,
I really didn't know that it was quite that so deeply rooted, but that like totally makes sense. And like
once you start breaking it down, like I mean, I don't even live in like the US. I live in Canada, but it's kind of very similar here. And that idea of what are you doing to be productive? Like what's the first thing you ask people? Oh, what do you do? Right? And what a lot of women say, oh, I'm just a stay-at-home mom. Because that work isn't seen as, it's not producing. You're not producing wealth and material goods. You're raising human beings. So that's not seen as valued.
Right.
Or
future generations of our country, you know, just kind of depending on you.
But it's not as important as going to
just
work.
To stay at home mom.
Yeah, just to stay at home mom. And I think too, what was I going to say? It goes back to, oh, lost my thought. ADHD meds are wearing off. Lost my thought.
Do you have any opening thoughts, Australia, on heavenly virtues?
I mean, pretty much everything that's been said is what I think about them too. I think they're used as an aspect to restrict and confine people. It doesn't allow people to fully express themselves or have full realization of themselves. It's used as a social restriction. It's meant to hold people back in a variety of very toxic ways. Now, I'm not saying that being kind is bad, but being kind too much can hurt you. I'm not saying that having prudence for a situation or being a prudent person is necessarily bad, but having too much can cause you to miss out on possibly good opportunities. You know, sure, temperance is great, but you know, all things in moderation can be taken to a very disgusting place as well. All of the virtues, just as the sins have qualities that can make them empowering. The virtues have qualities that can make them toxic.
Yeah. Yeah, I in particular have a really big issue with the virtue of chastity.
Mm-hmm.
Like that one I think is really gross, especially because like it's also primarily targeted on young women. Like
Oh.
how often are we actually really talking about the charity of or the chastity of young men? We're not. When Estrady and I were kind of kikiing a little bit earlier before this stream, my grandmother, who's like almost in her 90s now, calls me because my sister had told her that we were doing this sort of project. And she was like, Did you just kind of come up with this or where is this from? And I was like, yeah, we just kind of like took it and ran with it. Like she almost like didn't believe that like we came up with this. And then like I was talking with her about that too, and she was saying how, you know, like she's totally in support of this whole project. Like she thinks it's so great. She thinks it's so crazy, so new, so different, whatever. And, you know, she was talking about even, you know, men in her like generation and her era. It's like, oh, well, they have to kind of go out and have their wild time and sow their oats and whatever before you can really expect them to da 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 da. Like that was just the narrative. Not saying that that's her, you know,
No, but
hot
boys
take.
will be boys.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that like chastity is one in particular that's like has that added sinister layer because it is so much about controlling women and policing women's bodies.
I can't tell you how grossed out I am by that term. Boys will be boys. I hate that term so much. When I hear people say that, I'm like, I have to force myself not to gag just because, you know, it's like, so we're making it okay for boys to indulge in disgusting habits that they probably shouldn't be. You know, like I'm all for everyone having their vices and everything like that, but like some of the boys will be boys situations are not good.
No, I was just gonna say, boys will be boys is enabling rapists.
Right.
It's not a good rhetoric. No.
Right.
The other thing I was gonna say too is that so the virtues and then also the deadly sins, they're like social constructs that are trying to regulate normal, natural human states. Everybody feels a little bit of pride. I'm looking good today. Everybody feels a little bit of greed, right? Like, oh, I want another slice of cake. Everybody has wrath, lust, gluttony, sloth, envy. Those are all normal, natural human states of being. And by making them sinful, it's like saying your natural, normal state of being is amoral. It's unclean. It's about purity culture, you know?
That's one of my biggest, I think, points of distaste for the right hand path, sort of in general, is this idea that, for one, the divine exists externally. Like you are in no way connected to the divine, and the only way to get connected to the divine is through senseless devotion and completely destroying your own sense of self. And I think that, like, that just the whole narrative in general that like us as a species is inherently so flawed and foul that we need to somehow purify ourselves and rid us of our natural animal instincts as mammals, but like two, our sense of self and individuality and things that speak to us. We have to sacrifice that and kill it in order to appease some sort of very wild, corrupted, child abusing demiurge. Like, no, thank you. No, thank you. And I mean, I think it's affected our witch slash pagan community so much to a sense of like, there's a lot of people who even strive away from even working with deity outside of an Abrahamic lens because they don't want to worship. They don't want to be, you know, subservient. They don't want to be below. And like, I know so many witches and pagans that will even shy away from the word worship. You know, they'll say they're working with as opposed to like worship, or witches that will say, like, oh, I'm not religious, as if religious now has become like this really horrible, dirty word associated with conservative ideology, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really damaging.
They do. I think a lot of people come to, well, paganism, but to witchcraft specifically with sort of that like, even if they weren't raised Christian, I mean, in North America, we are Christian societies. It is just even if you were raised religious, our societies are based on Christian values. And you sort of come to witchcraft with this idea of there's one right way to do things. We are unclean, right? We were born with the original sin. We were all born to sin. We have to be baptized, da 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 da. And even if you didn't grow up with that, you still those ideas still float around in our culture, especially that idea of us being unclean or impure
or
Yeah,
unworthy.
something that's really sinister about that whole thing is there are actually churches that are built around the concept of you have to recognize that you are a horrid, disgusting, sinful creature and just accept the fact that you're this lowly, filthy thing. And the only way that you're going to get into heaven is by recognizing just how pathetic you are and doing your best to try and get into heaven, but you probably won't. Like, there are whole churches built around this. I used to work with somebody that went to one of these churches, and like the way that he would talk about himself, the way that he would like self-flagellate and things like that, like it was crazy.
It's brainwashing for
Yeah.
real. Like, and there's also, I mean, there's ministries that also believe and support this idea that it's not only are you scum of the earth and need to, purify yourself in order to be worthy, but there's also some people believe there's a predetermined list of who's getting in and not, and there's nothing you can do about it. Like, how horrible is that worldview? This belief that some people are inherently more worthy of forgiveness or salvation over other groups of people. Like, that just sounds like colonialism at its finest to me. Like,
Yeah.
Well, like that's where when I was researching sloth, so I can't speak to like all the sins, but on sloth, right with the arrival of the Puritans, the Puritans believed that if a person was a hard worker, it was a sign God had chosen them for salvation. Conversely, if a person couldn't focus on the task at hand or couldn't self-motivate, it was a sign that they'd already been damned and that they were displaying to the world that God hadn't chosen them for heaven. So, like, just right off the bat, you have that human state of like, hey, you know what, I need a day off. I'm gonna take a nap in the afternoon, and oh, you're damned by God. Like, you're showing everybody like there's nothing we can do. You're already screwed.
well, they say what? Idle hands make the devil's work or something like that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So this is just like an article that I have pulled up here from mythos.fandom.com, which I also just love the idea of like calling the Abrahamic fandom a fandom. Like, I just think that's fun, or like referring to it as mythology, because that's what it is. And we can talk about it and examine it as mythology. But before we get into that, I do want to say something else too. So obviously this whole Black Lent challenge is very much about blasphemy. Like, that's a huge part of it. And, I think to kind of piggyback off of what Taya just said about the wider patriarchy, colonialist, Abrahamic society and enforcing those sorts of beliefs and norms onto society, like whether or not you subscribe, you know, I personally don't really have a lot of like personal Abrahamic deep rooted like trauma in any way like that. My background was, kind of a mix of like almost pseudo Sufi-esque spiritual slash also very secular. Like, my dad's side of my family is pretty secular in general. So I personally don't, but there are a lot of other people who definitely do. And I think that sacred blasphemy can be something that can liberate someone from some of those shackles of oppression. But, it's also about revolting against like the powers that be, kind of like the whole story of like the Gospel of Aradia and like Aradia teaching the peasant folk like the art of the witch in order to liberate themselves from their greedy, problematic Catholic overlords, basically. And so I don't think that having Abrahamic trauma in any way is a requirement in order for you to get something out of this challenge. I don't think that it's a requirement. I think that, like where I live in the Midwest, like they're literally passing laws using this alt-right conservative Abrahamic worldview, trying to illegalize trans women like myself. Like, it's institutionalized. So regardless of me personally having Abrahamic trauma or not, it's very much affecting us in a very real, modern like way, like right now. You know, we just had a law passed in our state that prevents trans youth from medically transitioning in any way. I have a very good friend of mine who's an English teacher. If a child comes out and confides in her about maybe some of their gender or, you know, body dysphoria, things like that, she has to tell the parents and she has to tell the school board. She could lose her job. Like, she can't have any symbols in her classroom to show that this is a safe space for LGBT youth, more specifically trans youth. Like, I was a trans teenager in high school, like medically transitioning. Like, bills like this are going to harm children, which is what they claim they're trying to protect.
Well, and again, I think it goes back to the sin of lust, right? That's how they see it. It's about sex, and it's not. That's not what transgender is about at all.
Right.
But I think that when you look at the patriarchy sitting in their, sitting in their seats in the government, right? They're like, oh, we need to regulate people's sex lives. We need to, we don't expose our children to anything sexual. And anything that has anything to do with anything other than the straight up, I am a woman, I am a man. It's like they think it's all about deviance and sex and do you know what I mean? It's like that lust. To them, it's like it's about lust.
But at the same time, in the Midwest, okay?
Yeah.
I'm sure there's things similar in other parts of the US and Canada, but in the Midwest, it's like a very sick rite of passage that fathers will take their young sons into places like Hooters, right? With like very scantily clad women. Like, the whole bit is that it's a sexual thing. Like, that's Hooters bit, right? All the sexual innuendos, all that. They'll take their sons there. I saw a post on Facebook just today where someone had dressed their daughter up as a Hooters girl. Like, but that's not sexualizing children.
See, and that's the thing, is that the only people that are making trans people, drag queens, whatever, into a sexual situation are the people on that side of the line. And I am willing to draw that line in the sand. It's those people on the right. It's those people in that political situation that choose to sexualize children and women. It is the patriarchy. And, it's one of those things that no matter how many times we as trans people, are like, this isn't a sexual thing. This has nothing to do with sex. This has to do with us taking care of ourselves mentally and physically and being healthy. That's not what they're hearing. They're hearing, oh, you want to change what's in your pants. So obviously it's about sex. And it's like, no.
And not even all trans people even want that. Like,
exactly.
And trans medicalism is a problem too. I think, on the other side of it, especially for just women in general, like, our bodies are often a topic of discussion. But I think that one thing that trans men as women struggle with in a different way than cis women is that there's also this like strong push for us to constantly have to perform hyperfemininity in order for us to be seen and valid as women. That cis women, I'm not saying that they don't have their own societal influences and, toxic things that society pushes, like beauty standards and stuff, by all means, like, definitely. But I'm saying, like, that's one specific instance where it's like, also, if you're not performing it the way that we need you to perform it, then you also are not valid.
But the double-edged sword of that at the same time is that when we are giving what we're being asked, like to provide that hyperfemininity that everybody asks for, then we're being accused of propping up gender stereotypes.
And misogyny.
And we're just men putting on dresses and things like that.
Mm-hmm. We're performing for the male gaze.
Yeah. And it's like, the narrative is ultimately damned if you do, damned if you don't, because based on their mentality, all we are is sexual predators.
Right.
That are also secretly plotting to go out into the night and steal cis women's uteruses.
And make the frickin' frogs gay.
Now, we can make the frickin' frogs gay. That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I put these ridiculous bows in my hair today for myself. Like, for my own, like, pleasure. Like,
I put on this Barbie pink eyeshadow for me.
Right. So let's get into some of this, guys. Okay, so this is the Mythos fandom wiki, 7 heavenly virtues. Feel free to check this out. Maybe I'll link it in the description of this video if I can remember. But basically, this is credited to the Greek philosophers, from what I'm seeing in this article, Aristotle and Plato, who basically kind of put forth that prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance are the 4 sort of most desirable characteristics. So this is kind of going back to actually like Greek society and like some Greek paganism. And the 7 sins were basically kind of created out of these 4 cardinal, or not the 7 sins, but the 7 virtues were basically kind of pulled from these 4 desirable characteristics. And when I was looking at like the 7 sins on the list and the 7 virtues, I noticed that like if you kind of look into it, sometimes the thing that is listed as the 7 virtues, like sometimes they differ a little bit more than the sins do. Um, but I guess we can talk about charity first, since that's at the top of this list. So, for the sake of this Witch's Black Lent, we're kind of doing like some alchemy with this idea that these virtues are being kind of propositioned as like this is what is holy, right, and sacred. And so, for the sake of the challenge, especially for your particular sin, you should be thinking of its counterpart and how actually that virtue can be very psychologically damaging. So, you're not using charity to combat your greed. You're allowing yourself to be greedy and working with your greed and reflecting on how charity can harm people. So, in this article, many times when charity is mentioned in the English language Bibles, it refers to the love of God, which is a spiritual love that is extended from God to man and then reflected by man, who is made in the image of God, back to God. Charity has 2 parts, a love of God and a love of man, which includes both love of one's neighbor and oneself as theological virtues. Charity is divinely infused into the soul, and it resides in the will. I thought that was interesting how they outlined our will. Charity is held to be the ultimate perfection of the human spirit because it is said to glorify and reflect the nature of God. Um, so I think charity, right, as a whole, that's like a positive thing to be charitable. But talking about just the latest issue of like trying to illegalize trans people. There are charities like the Salvation Army that would rather me be homeless and freeze to death on the street than provide me with housing or care. They would, instead of actually, taking care of the homeless, well, sure, let's take care of the homeless as long as they're not LGBTQ. If they are, they're going to need to stay outside and freeze to death. Like, so when you're going into the grocery store and you see the Salvation Army, like around December, which is in our area where they get really active and they're ringing their bell and everything, I feel like that's kind of become like a quintessential aspect of the holiday season in our area. Those red outfits and those red bells are the death bells of homeless LGBT people that when you are giving them money, you're directly funding that.
Yeah, actually, it's funny. Anytime it's around that time of year and I go to the grocery store or something like that, my husband generally has to be like, don't say anything. You don't have to pick a fight today. Because I will fully stand next to this person and be like, this charity, leaves trans people out in the cold. This charity like messes with LGBT people. Like, I'm perfectly happy to call them out right there in front of the store. And I've done it on multiple occasions because it's freaking sick. On a smaller scale with charity, look at how often people will use charity as a means to guilt people. Like if you have a windfall or if you are in a good situation, but you aren't necessarily in such a good situation that you can give, or maybe you're just not willing to give at that point in time. People will use that against you and use the aspect of charity to guilt you into feeling like you should give.
I was just going to say in this economy, how many people are struggling, and this idea that you need to like be charitable and give things away makes people very reluctant to accept charity, right? People are like, I don't want to go to the food bank because I'm not supposed to, I'm not supposed to partake of that. I'm supposed to be contributing to that. I'm supposed to be giving to the food bank, not taking from the food, even though those social systems are set up to help people.
Mm-hmm.
And how many people are just, like, it just makes people feel terrible that, I'm supposed to be charitable, but I have nothing to give. It's a very much coming from a place of wealth privilege, right? This idea that you have to be charitable and you have to like donate to causes and, volunteer your time. And, the single working mother who's living on the poverty line doesn't have the time or the means to do those sorts of things. So she's not a good enough person.
It's sick.
Yeah. And like, I think that it's also oftentimes used as a way that people like to almost kind of publicly pat themselves on the back at like what a great person they are. And it's almost, to me, if we're going to talk about will and like our true will, and that sort of almost like, I think of that aspect within Thelema of like following our true will. If your true will is to help this charity because you want to be seen helping that charity and not because you actually care about your neighbor, is that really, truly, actually charity?
No, that's not. You're not doing it with a charitable heart. You're
Right.
doing it for personal gain.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So therefore, yeah, it doesn't count.
Can we highlight what Mikey just said, please? Because it's hilarious.
Right here.
Yes.
Yeah, performance activism for charity.
Yeah, it's really sad. Like, I've donated to a lot of charities. Do I make a big deal about it? No. Because I did it to be charitable, not to get a pat on the back.
Right.
And I think a lot of those virtues can be very performative.
Yeah.
How many people do you know who go and get sober and then lord it over everybody else? How you need to be sober. You need to live this lifestyle too, right? Things can go to like an nth degree.
I don't mean to laugh. That's funny to me because of a conversation Jasmine and I were having just before this.
Yeah, so before our stream, I was talking with Estradia and I was like, I kind of want to like eat a special little treat before our stream tonight. And she was like, go for it. I was like, yeah, maybe I'll just have to introduce like our video. It's like, hey guys, it's Jasmine. I'm once again under the influence, and here's my sober friend. She's sober. Let's give it up for her and her sobriety. Okay, so chastity. This is one of my personal least favorites. So let's have a moment. The words chaste and chastity stem from the Latin adjective pure. The words entered the English language around the middle of the 13th century. Chastity is defined as refraining from any sexual contact or romantic relationships and refers to the regulation of sexual desires. Chastity is usually defined within the moral standards and guidelines of a culture, civilization, and religion. However, the term is often closely associated with and can be used interchangeably with sexual abstinence, especially in the context of premarital and extramarital sex. I think that this is very damaging in the sense that there is data and studies that show that when our children are not given a proper sex education, that's where we are having much higher cases of teen and unwanted pregnancies.
Information doesn't breed lust. Right?
Yeah.
I think that's the premise that they go on, right? If we teach children about safe sex, then they're all going to want to do it.
But
not
right, and
that
it's like
they're going to want to do it anyway. So
and they're already doing it.
Yeah.
A lot of them are already experimenting. So why not make it safer as opposed to trying to completely outlaw it?
Going back to something you said, who carries the burden of chastity?
Yeah.
Women. That's like a lot of these are kind of equal opportunity, but when it comes to chastity, I really feel that's
even still, while a lot of them are equal opportunity, I feel like most of them, because again, patriarchy are directed at controlling women. Because you said it really well in your video about sloth. Like, if a woman isn't productive, she's looked down upon. And it's just sorry, all this talk about the patriarchy is getting me heated.
And just to clarify for everybody who's watching, the patriarchy includes men and women. The patriarchy is a system of oppression, and it's not men. It's a system that has been set up to benefit cishet white men. But the patriarchy is a system. It's not a class of people.
Right.
And I know plenty of women who are part of the patriarchy. So just before anybody gets off and is all like, "Wow, not all men," da 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 da. That's not
Right.
not what it is.
Yeah, there are plenty of women who contribute to the patriarchy, who contribute to that, who contribute to misogyny, to those narratives that keep people who want to be able to freely express themselves and to live in a way that isn't confined by certain social constructs. You know, women contribute to that too. Trans people contribute to that too. Gay people contribute to that too. There are every person
Every
from
single people.
every people from all walks of life contribute to it.
Yeah. It really also brings to my mind, I believe it's a quote by Anton LaVey, not insinuating that like LaVey is my guy or anything, but I believe that there is a quote that he's noted with, which is probably definitely in my pool of like, if we had favorite quotes, what we would think of. There's a quote by Anton LaVey that's where he says, "The beast within man needs to be exercised, not exercised." And I feel like that rings a lot of truth because these sins are human natural instincts. Like, this is who we are as a species.
Yeah.
So I think that if these sins, if our lust, for example, isn't exercised and you try to exercise it, I think it's going to come out in ways that can directly cause harm, you know?
Violent ways,
So
yeah.
I think that our lust actually needs to be encouraged, celebrated, and acted upon. And I also don't think that lust is completely synonymous with just sexual hedonism and immorality of that nature.
If you would like a thorough explanation of lust, there's a certain individual who made a video countering some of our points where I perfectly detailed the aspects of lust. So, you know.
Very good.
Yeah, that video was funny.
Not that I want to give him any more time, but like, you know, couldn't go on with this without mentioning him at least once.
Yeah, I would even say that there was a lot of lust even in that video.
Yeah, I would say
You
so.
know.
A lot of lust, a lot of wrath.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Maybe the real root is envy.
Maybe
You know.
maybe envy. I would say that's probably the real root.
So yeah, lust, chastity. I just think there's something like so completely unnatural about chastity. Like, that is just so completely unnatural.
And I think we've fallen so far down this like chastity hole as a society that people, and especially men, don't know how to relate sexually and romantically to other people without, you know, in a healthy way, you know?
Mhm.
Because it's so taboo that we're just like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, when they have the natural urge to do it. And just something about that men's chemistry, it's like they just like they break and they don't know how therefore to have healthy sexual relationships.
Mhm.
And I think that comes down to education because
Yeah.
no one is willing to teach proper sexual education because they're like, oh, the children can't know these things. They need to know these things at some point.
And
Because
then
if
we
they
don't
don't, yeah, if we leave them to their own devices, that's when we have children getting pregnant before their bodies are ready to handle that sort of thing.
well, and we
That's when
have men who don't know, who don't understand consent.
we have
And
school
and then
systems.
they understand now that like I can't just do, but then they're like, well, now I just can't do anything.
We have school systems that tell girls that they can't wear spaghetti straps because you'll
Yeah.
see their shoulders. Oh no, not shoulders.
Yeah, like
Well,
all the boys are going to
yeah,
be driven to distraction because boys will be boys.
right, and they're given a pass.
And they can't control themselves, and we're teaching them that when we tell them that the girls need to cover their shoulders is because the boys can't control themselves, giving them a pass to do.
Which is it in Leviticus where their God tells the young men that if you cannot avert your eyes, you need to rip them out.
I'm just saying, I invite everyone in the chat to be distracted by my shoulders.
Oh, she has shoulders.
Mm.
And I mean, there's religious organizations, like I shared this screenshot from a church's page that was talking about chastity and kind of giving like chastity sermon, if you will. 100% directed at their female congregation and actually excusing marital rape because that's a part of your duty as a wife. And
I'm
that's
sorry,
part of,
what?
yes,
Mm-hmm.
like basically allowing marital rape because that is your husband's right. And that is your role as his wife to submit to your husband. And that's marital rape is basically the church saying that that's not a thing.
No, no, no. Okay, so I have a personal thing about this. Not that anyone needs to hear my entire history or anything like that. I used to be in a very abusive relationship with somebody where that person decided at one point in time that they were going to use, basically, they were going to roofie me because I had stopped doing things for them. And they decided they were going to use, pills to take advantage of me because it was their right to have my body.
Yeah.
And
Toxic chastity.
me being a forlorn, desperate trans woman who the narrative for trans women is often told that trans women have a lower chance of getting into healthy relationships, was like, well, I'm never going to find anybody else. So I guess I'm stuck with this. And I allowed myself to be abused like that for over a year because of toxic chastity and all this other and guilt and fear of the outside world because I didn't think I could find better because of the way that our world projects things onto women and especially trans women. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's so fucked.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, welcome to womanhood, right? Everybody thinks they own your body now. It's not yours anymore. It
Yeah.
belongs to the patriarchy.
Also, thank you for the love that's coming from the chat. I'm sorry, I know that was a really hard, deep subject to get into. I appreciate all of you. That was not I was not intending to bring the vibe down, but we're talking about the toxic traits of virtue. So, but I love you all. Thank you for the support.
Yeah, and that absolutely. I'm going to continue eating my special treat, definitely, after that. But yeah, that's a great example of toxic chastity. Diligence. So this kind of, chimes into some of what Taya was saying. Diligent behavior is indicative of a work ethic, a belief that work is good in of itself. Diligence is carefulness and persistent effort to work. Diligence in Christianity is the effort to do one's part while keeping faith and reliance on God. In other words, diligence and faith are two sides of a mystery. One does not know how, despite one's effort, it will all work out, but diligence, when combined with faith, assures spiritual success. Diligence, as one of the 7 virtues, describes thoroughness, completeness, and persistence of action, particularly in matters of faith. Interesting. I hadn't really thought of diligence in a faith-based way.
Oh, absolutely. The church puts a lot of emphasis on things like diligence and things like that. If you are an unproductive member of the church, oftentimes you end up becoming a pariah.
Yeah, it's all especially in those church societies, who's volunteering for what, who's involved with what. It's all about what you're doing for the church.
I think a really good example of this from the Bible and just how messed up the concept of diligence is the story of Job. The whole story of Job is built around God and the devil make a bet about Job's willingness to put his faith on the line. And so basically, God rains horrible things down on Job to test his diligence in his faith. And ultimately, in the end, it leaves Job mad, his wife blind, and his children dead.
Yeah, I think I remember one of my friends who went very religious school. Because I wasn't really familiar with the story of Job up until she was kind of telling me about it. And he got a lot of the things that he loved taken away from him, right?
Mm-hmm.
But God never took his wife away, I thought in the story. She gets wounded or something, but
He's
he doesn't
blinded.
he doesn't lose his wife. Did he not really love his wife?
But it's a perfect example of how, especially from the stance of looking at this deity, Like, we have a lot of mythology. We've seen a lot of deities do some messed up things. But this is supposed to be Jehovah, Yahweh, God. This is supposed to be an entity of infinite love. And so makes a deal with the devil to basically destroy this man's life, wound his wife, take his children, ruin his home, fallow his land, in order to prove this man's faith and diligence.
Isn't there one part in this? Does he take his kids up to like the mountain to like? Is that Job or is that another story where he goes to go kill his son and then God's like, just kidding.
Yeah,
You don't
that's
actually have
Job.
to do that.
That's Job. That's basically the end of it, is when Job like sacrifices his children or child, and then God was like, good job, you're full of faith, yeah, finger guns. and then Job's left like broken.
Yeah.
And this is why I tell people, like, I do not necessarily identify like fully as a Satanist or anything like that, but I have much love for the devil, because read the Bible. Go ahead, any version of the Bible, read the Bible. Tell me where the devil did anything wrong. Give me a single moment where the devil did anything wrong, other than be like, okay, God, you do you. It doesn't exist. The devil is not the great tempter. The great tempter is God.
And I just think Yahweh is sick.
Right.
Like, cringe. Get better gods, you know?
Bougie, you might be right. It might have been Abraham. I might be getting some of my stories mixed up. But either way, like, the narrative is still there, that God will use his disciples' faith against them so that they can prove their faith and their diligence to him.
Mm-hmm.
And therein lies the toxicity. Therein lies the problem. Therein lies the curse of virtue.
Shall we go to the next one?
Yeah.
Gratitude. Yeah. I think that this one is a particularly fun one to kind of mentally alchemize, because when you hear kindness, I think that's probably one on the list that most people would instinctively be like, well, that's a good virtue. So here's what they say. Gratitude or kindness is a feeling of appreciation as a response by the recipient of an act or gift of kindness, generosity, or charity. Gratitude is not the same as indebtedness, which spurs on the need to repay the giver. Martin Luther referred to gratitude as the same basic Christian attitude, and today it is still referred to as the heart of gospel. Christians are strongly encouraged to praise, give gratitude to their Creator. In Christian gratitude, God is seen as the selfless giver of all good things, and because of this, there is a deep sense of gratefulness, which enables Christians to share a common bond, shaping all aspects of a follower's life. Gratitude in Christianity is an acknowledgement of God's generosity that inspires Christians to shape their own thoughts and actions around such ideals, instead of simply a sentimental feeling. Christian gratitude is regarded as a virtue that shapes not only the emotions and thoughts, but also the actions and deeds. Kindness, a behavior marked by ethical characteristics, a pleasant disposition, and concern and consideration for others. It is considered a virtue and recognized as a value in many cultures and religions. That's what we have on gratitude, kindness.
I think gratitude is one of those things that a lot of toxic positivity culture has latched onto, where one of the things that they love to do is they like to be like, be grateful. Look at all the things in your life. Be grateful for those things. If you don't have a lot of things in your life, that's okay. Be grateful for what you do have. Just be grateful. Don't want more. Just be grateful. And then kindness is something that I feel like people don't really understand. People misunderstand kindness and being nice. And so I think really the biggest issue with kindness in a toxic way is if you aren't in a given situation nice to somebody, people will hold that over your head and be like, you're not being a very kind person right now. But also, kindness is not transactional. Kindness is not currency. Kindness is something that you offer to people that perhaps you have respect for, or sometimes perhaps kindness is something that you give to people because they need that level of healing. But kindness is not currency, and no one is owed kindness at any point in time. I like to offer people kindness often because I feel like people need more kindness in this world, but I'm not doing it to get anything in return. And I'm certainly not doing it because I want to show other people an example of how they should be. Kindness should just be something that you give willingly, and it'd be a one-way thing. You offer it, the person takes it, and that's it. If they give you kindness back, cool. But and then with gratitude, gratitude is just is another like sword of Damocles that people like to hold over your head. Be grateful. Be grateful that I gave you this thing. Be grateful
Be
for
grateful
this.
it's
Be
not
grateful for that.
worse.
Yeah. So that's kind of my take on gratitude and kindness.
Yeah, it's like sorry, you're talking about kindness and niceness, and it's like niceness is the negativity, right? You're right, like when it becomes transactional, like you hear it from a lot of men. Well, I was really nice to her.
Mm-hmm.
Why wouldn't she put out? I was really nice to her. I'm a nice guy, but you're doing it with the expectation that it's transactional. If I am nice to you, therefore you will put out for me. And it's like, no, you're not kind. There's a difference.
Nice guy incel culture is disgusting.
Oh, it's awful.
Well, and I like what Maria's saying here, like bringing that back to patriarchy. Women are taught to be nice and smile on demand since they're small. I was like talking with one of my friends who, like, she actually grew up in Germany, and she was saying how one of the things that's so interesting, and maybe some of this is true for Canadians too, but like here in America, here in the Midwest, if you like thank someone who's doing a service to you, like let's say like your waitress or something, most of us are going to be like, oh gosh, no problem. Like instead of being just like, you're welcome, like acknowledging that I did this for you and it was burdensome and I did it. You know what I mean? Instead of just saying like, thank you. Like, we're going to go into explaining how not only were we happy to do that for you, but like it was no burden to us at all. Like, as opposed to just saying, you're welcome. Like, I was like, I never really thought about that because I know I do that all the time. Like, no worries, no problem. Like,
I
instead of
do
just
that
saying,
too.
yeah.
Yeah, I do that too.
See, I'm Canadian, and we have a big thank you culture up here. Like thank you, well, it's more like excuse me, but like if I'm standing in the store and somebody walks into me, I'm like, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
They walked into me and I'm like, oh, sorry. And like, thank you. Like we're constantly like, thank you for everything. And it's really hard when somebody says thank you. It's really hard to just go, you're welcome.
Yeah.
It's always, yeah, you're right. It's always like, oh, no worries. Oh, no worries. No worries.
No problem.
No problem. No worries.
Usually the way that I'll handle it is when someone's like, thank you, I'll be like, oh, you're so welcome. Because adding that so in there softens it, I guess, to me. So they'll be like, thank you. I'm like, you're so welcome.
I usually am just like, no worries.
You're
like,
so welcome.
so welcome.
So welcome.
You're right.
Okay.
When somebody says thank you and you just go, you're welcome, it feels almost dismissive, right?
But yeah.
You're so welcome. Yeah.
Yeah. Humility.
Don't know her.
I think this is the counterpart to pride, right?
Pride, yeah.
Yeah. So humility is an outward expression of an appropriate inner or self-regard and is also similar to meekness. I think that's an important distinction. It is different from humiliation, which is an opposition, often external, of shame upon a person. In religious context, humility can mean a recognition of self in relation to deity, like deities, God, self-debasement with subsequent submission to said entity as a member of that religion. Outside of a religious context, humility is defined as being unselved, a liberation from consciousness of self, a form of temperance that is neither having pride nor indulging in self-deprecation. Humility in various interpretations is widely seen as a virtue, which centers on low self-preoccupation and a willingness to put oneself forward. It is in many religions and philosophical traditions. It contrasts with narcissism, hubris, and other forms of pride, and is an idealistic and rare intrinsic construct that has an intrinsic words. Ooh, we got through it. Jasmine can read. No. Yeah.
So
Yeah, go ahead, take the wheel, Pride.
Just to go, I'll go ahead and step in here, yeah, because my
Yeah.
sin for Witch's Black Lent was pride. Pride has, for a long time, been my favorite sin, because it's a sin that allowed me to get to where I am today. Because something with humility is, especially when it comes to queer culture, when it comes to gay culture, when it comes to trans culture, is we're often told that we lack humility because we are flamboyant, we are ostentatious, you know, we are, some of us are loud, some of us are brightly colored, some of us are, we're just different from the regular populace, and because of that we are told we lack humility. It was through the use of pride that I managed to get myself to a place where I had the strength to be myself. It's the sin that allowed me to have the strength to step away from toxic situations because I put my value above those situations. Also, who doesn't love a little bit of vanity, you know? Like, who doesn't love a little bit of glam? Because that falls in there. The fact that, you know, people like us as women, or those of us who aren't women who wear cosmetics or wear anything that enhances our features, is considered vanity, is considered prideful. And according to La Biblioteca, you know, these things are bad. You shouldn't be a painted whore, you know? Don't be a painted lady.
It's interesting you
And
say that because all of the things that you think of when you think pride
mhm,
relate to women.
yeah,
What do men
entirely.
do to express their pride?
I
Nothing
mean,
they do is bad.
look at all these weak-chinned men out here with beards. I'm just saying. If they think that that's not cosmetic,
Okay.
um, but pride has always been such um, a powerful energy for me. When I visualize pride, for me, the symbolism that I've always used is a purple flaming crown. That's always been the symbol of pride for me, and that is the symbol that I've always, like, pick up your crown, queen. Like, that's how I've managed to elevate myself to a place where I have self-esteem. Also, I would like to throw this out there, that not that long ago my self-esteem was in a very dark place, and Miss Ambrosia was a very big uh component to helping me get to a place where I loved myself more. So just throwing a little love to my
Oh
sister
my
over
gosh,
here.
this is getting so deep tonight.
I
Like,
know.
oh my gosh.
But humility is such a toxic thing. Humility is
Mhm.
the destruction of the self to make yourself socially palatable.
It's know your place.
It's know your place.
And it ain't
And
at the top, honey.
yeah, because they don't want you up there.
Or even I think just when we're, celebrating ourselves, be it like verbally and externally, like we're excited about something that we've accomplished, or maybe something that we had to save up for in order to like purchase or whatever. Like we're always told too, like, oh, you need to be humble. Well, be humble. It's almost like a fuck you, shut up and stop celebrating. Like,
Know your
Also,
place.
uh, Blood, I'm not talking about you, honey. You're not the weak chinned bearded man that I'm talking about. You're gorgeous. You're gorgeous. Calm down. You're gorgeous.
patience.
Don't know her.
Patience.
Actually, that's not true. I am the mother of an 8-year-old. I know patience.
Well, it's the ability to endure difficult circumstances, persevere through stressful periods, wait through delays without irritation and annoyance. That's horrible. Like, that's terrible. Okay. Tolerate provocation without responding in annoyance or anger. The level of endurance one can have before negativity, commonly associated with steadfastness in the Christian religion. Patience is one of the most valuable virtues of life. Increasing patience is viewed as the work of the Holy Ghost in the Christian God who has accepted the gift of salvation. While patience is not one of the traditional biblical three theological virtues, nor one of the traditional cardinal virtues, it's part of the fruit of the Holy Spirit in accordance with the Apostle Paul in his Galatian blah
I
word.
don't want that fruit. He can keep that fruit. I don't want it. Because
Patient.
this.
So
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
was going to say, patience is the opposite of wrath, right? And why do we not want people to be wrathful? Because they will band together and rise up and overthrow the patriarchy. Be patient. Be patient. Just accept your lot in life. It's okay. But that can totally be a negative, because there are situations in life where you need to get angry and you need to want more for yourself, and you need to say, F this noise, I want more for myself. I'm angry, and that's going to catalyze me to do something with my life. It's going to catalyze me to get out of this situation and find a better job or leave a abusive marriage or whatever it is, right? Like, you need to get a little bit angry and wrathful. And it's like telling people that, well, you need to have humility and be patient. And that is totally accept your lot in life.
And the idea, this goes back to toxic positivity culture, because the idea that you're not allowed to feel frustration, that you're not allowed to feel annoyance, these are all part of the human emotional spectrum. Anything that tells you that you can't feel a certain way because it's not of God, fuck that. Everyone can feel what they need to feel. What makes it a determining factor is how you react to those feelings.
Yeah.
Annoyance, if you're in an annoying situation, it's okay to be annoyed. If you're in a situation that's frustrating, it's okay to be frustrated. It doesn't mean that you're lacking in patience. It means that you're human and you feel things.
And you're also totally allowed to call me and bitch about it. Like, just in
Call
general.
now. Are you annoyed? Are you frustrated? Call
We want to
Jasmine.
hear
She'll
about it.
listen. We want to hear your tea.
On 1-800, I can't. I also think it's a bit damaging, especially for witches. Like going back to like the charmed, not using magic for personal gain. So ridiculous. I think that patience and some of what we talked about earlier, also like putting the power in the hands of something outside of yourself. Like, oh, if you're wanting to manifest XYZ, like you should just it's all in God's plan. Like instead of trying to force things. Yeah, instead of trying to force things to happen or actually sit in the driver's seat and take accountability for your own manifestations. Like go out and take it for yourself. Don't be humble. Don't be patient.
It's okay to be that girl. It's okay to be the girl who's like frustrated, who's loud. I mean, look at Jasmine.
Period.
Look at her.
Period.
Jasmine's like my hero. And that like goes back to envy, right? Which is, I guess, the opposite of kindness. Don't want what other people have.
Mm-hmm.
Don't look at your overlords and say, geez, you guys have a really nice life. I want that life. Don't be envious. Be happy with your lot in life.
Are you guys looking at the chat at all? Hellbound Heathen is cracking me up.
That's the yeast that you can do.
There's a whole like patriarchy thing going on in the chat, and it's hilarious.
Well, we have temperance. Defined as the moderation or voluntary self-restraint, typically described in terms of what an individual voluntarily refrains from doing. The Old Testament emphasizes temperance as a core virtue, and in the Bible, it is synonymous with self-control and discipline. Temperance includes restraint from retaliating by nonviolence and forgiving others, restraint from arrogance in the form of humility and modesty, and restraint from excess, such as extravagant luxury, or splurging now in the form of prudence, and restraint from excessive anger or craving for something in the form of calmness and self-control. Can also refer to the abstinence or moderation of alcohol. So this is gluttony's counterpart, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. It's
All
basically
things in moderation.
It's basically don't take any pleasure in life.
Yeah.
That's what I get from like lust and gluttony is don't take any pleasure in life. Have chastity, have sobriety, don't enjoy your life. You're meant to suffer. You're not meant to be happy. You're not meant to have like carnal pleasures. You're meant to, wallow.
And this is why I frequently say, I feel like every individual, every person needs at least one vice that they cling onto, because otherwise we'd go insane. Like Nocturnal said, how dull. Like, it is okay for you to indulge. It's okay for you to be a little gluttonous. It's okay for you to be lustful and want and have desire for things. Some things in moderation. Sure, that's fine, but don't let that inhibit you.
I love Mikey's quote.
Right? But I've brought up the Old Testament to Christians before when we've been having, religious arguments, and they're like, "Oh, we don't count that part anymore."
Yeah.
That part we took that back. That's fine. No. That didn't happen. That was a different God. That was a different
Our
Jehovah.
entire religion is based on it, but we don't count that anymore.
We don't count that part.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, when it comes to seven deadly sins, I've always just found them interesting and intriguing. And I like to almost think of them like, okay, if you were going to create like a cartoon, what would sloth look like? Like, what is sloth's personality? Like, what color hair does sloth have? Like, are they personified? Are they anthropomorphic? Like, what color are they? Like, I love this idea of us almost kind of creating servitors forged out of sin. Like,
I've actually attributed symbols, colors, and elements to the sins. So yeah.
When you started this, and it was like, I think it's next week, we're supposed to make like a statue or something, or some kind of art piece around our. And to me, I'm like, sloth has always been this like this amorphous blob of just brown muckiness. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's a little pink poppet shaped like me that's like taking care of itself and that loves it. Do you know what I mean? Like, working through this, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's not this like grody, nasty thing that I've been conditioned to. It's about caring for myself. So anyways, yeah, just when you're like, what does it look like? I'm like, ow! Like, my whole thing has changed on what I think that sin looks like.
yeah.
As dreads. No.
Yeah. I think it's a fun idea. Like, I've been trying to think more on like how the spirit of lust, shows itself to me, like what they look like. So that's been fun as a personal exercise, and exercising that beast, not exercising it. So can't go into too many details on this platform. No, I'm kidding.
You'll get deplatformed by YouTube.
Right.
I mean, pride has always, like, when I actually at one point in time did a project that was like kind of an art project, kind of a magical project that involved sin. And I had created these demons that were supposed to embody the sins. And for me, pride was always this tall, broad, not necessarily broad shoulders, but chin up, straight back, burning purple crown, being of regality and confidence and power, because to me, pride is the king or queen or the ruler of the sins, because all of the sins feed into each other. Not necessarily just in pride, but all of the sins feed into each other. There is an alchemical process here of all of the sins feeding into each other. But pride was always my favorite. And so pride for me has always been the color purple, the color of royalty, the symbol of the crown. When I would attribute elements to it, it was oftentimes because, first of all, let me say this. If the blue hair didn't key you in, I'm a nerd. I play a lot of video games. I watch a lot of anime. So like, for me, like, pride was always like the element of darkness. So the element of regality and a fundamental aspect of creation. And so there was that's always how I've kind of embodied pride. And then like I've attributed sense to it. Ironically, one of those senses, Jasmine. I promise I am not trying to like
read me,
like read you or just like simp or anything like that. But Jasmine has long been one of my favorite fragrances. Not her, the flower.
She's sweet.
But like since like Jasmine, actually one of my favorite incenses that I use in my regular practice is Night Queen, which Jasmine is one of the senses in senses is one of the fragrances. There we go. Had to one of the fragrances in Night Queen. So for me, these are the things that embody pride.
Or like think about like what offerings would you be giving her? You know, like this spirit, this entity, this demon of pride, which I'm pretty sure when I was kind of like just reading about the sins overall last week, I think pride is the original sin. Like all the sins kind of pour into each other, but pride is like the oldest and the original. And like if these were to be seven children in like a sibling order, children. If they were to be seven children, I think pride is the big sister. Like she's the oldest, she's the firstborn, as opposed to like going down the list. Because I was thinking of that too. Like, where would these sins fall in birth order then? If like pride is mentioned as the oldest, I've never heard or seen anything where it's like, oh, gluttony is the baby child of the family, you know, or
baby child.
The baby child.
And I think a good offering for pride is offerings to yourself. Like for me, that is, you know, hyping my shit up every day. That's putting on a pretty face. That's, you know, and doing it for me because I am the girl.
Not that girl, honey, the girl.
Not that girl, the girl.
Right.
And that's the affirmation. Put the flaming purple crown on and make sure people know that you are the girl.
Bougie says pride is the queen sin with her 6 cheering.
All them cheering.
But yeah, I've been trying to think about like I also thought, you know, I guess I just love an air dry clay moment. I think I'm in my air dry clay era right now. I don't know, but we had like our air dry clay craft day in 28 Days Witchy, and then we have this air dry clay in this challenge as well. Ooh, that special treat, giggly. Yeah.
Witches do love their crafts.
Hey, what kind of offerings would you do for sloth?
I don't know.
Like what incense? What would sloth's like fragrance be?
I'm like armpits.
Valerian, maybe.
I love valerian.
Valerian's a great herbal thing too for like calming anxiety.
It's so good for anxiety. Oh,
Nocturnal
everybody
burrito.
like I used to wear it and everybody'd be like, why do you smell like dirty feet? And I'm like, it's valerian, and it's like, to me it smells like piney almost.
See, I think for sloth, like something really like rich and heady that almost makes you feel drowsy when you smell it.
Calming.
Maybe lavender.
Or opium.
Or opium. Opium's perfect.
Just burn some opium in my house.
There you go. Just turn your house into an opium den. Perfect.
Or what about like what type of food? Like what? Like okay, if they all were to get a snack plate, what would sloth's preferred snack plate be to be placed on the altar? Like, you know, I definitely think when I think of scents or when I think of like offerings to like lust, I think of like aphrodisiacs. And I think of like really rich, like patchouli, rose, vanilla-esque is like when I think of like food, I think of like chocolate dipped strawberries or, you know, just like really decadent, sweet, almost like too rich, you know? Like you're like, oh, that's so sweet.
I know what sloth is.
Yes.
It's a bag of M&Ms as big as your head that you've eaten in 2 days.
Yes.
Which, my fellow Americans, I am commissioning this, where we have got to help Taya out up there in Canada, in that scary Shadowland where they only have 4 different flavors of M&Ms. I'm personally petitioning that you all send me M&Ms for me to send to Taya because we're going to be doing a snack crate exchange. And it's horrifying how few flavors of Oreos and M&Ms are available to the Canadian public. And this is a crime.
Peanut butter. And maybe one other one. That's all.
I'm telling you though, Canada has my favorite potato chips, and you can't get them here, and that's the all dressed chips.
She's who told me about it. Yeah.
Those chips.
Yeah, I asked Taya. I was like, "You have them?"
Ketchup chips are even better than. I'll send you both, Jasmine. But ketchup chips are even better than all dressed.
Does it taste like ketchup?
It's like a sweet salt and vinegar.
I mean, I'm down to try it. I just told you about how we were doing picklebacks over the weekend, so I think I can try a ketchup
so good.
chip.
Yeah,
I definitely think food for pride. It would almost be similar to like lust. It would be like decadent, self-indulgent things. Like for some reason, the thing that sprang to mind first was macarons.
Oh.
Like on a platter, stacked beautifully, macarons, and like
food that's almost so beautifully like plated that you almost don't even want to eat it. Yes. Like that cute carrot rose they stick into your Thai tea. Like
super fancy food.
Yeah. I think if I were to anthropomorphize my spirit of lust, I definitely think that they would be like a bunny. I think that, excited, ambitious, like go. Like I feel like lust would be very like peppy and like full of life, a lust for life, right?
So are we doing animals now?
Well, I was just thinking like how would you have
because like rabbits and fertility and like effing like rabbits, and I'm like, that's perfect.
Also, rabbit fur is a luxury item, and that stems from desire as well. So, see? For pride, I think people would automatically think I would go for lion. But actually, I think I would go with snake because there's something very regal and beautiful and proud about snakes. The sovereignty of a serpent.
Or a peacock.
I was going to say, I thought of like a big bird, like an ostrich.
The peacock is great. Ostrich, yes.
Well, I think ostriches are kind of like the queen. Like, I don't know. And I think back to like, what was that? Like Fantasia with like the ostrich ballerinas. I wanted to be her growing up. I wanted to be the ostrich ballerina.
I wanted to be the hippopotamus.
For a sloth, I'd pick a sloth. Be like perfect.
When I attributed animal symbols to some of the sins, one of the symbols I used for sloth was a spider. Because spiders, while they are diligent creatures in making their webs, they are also very patient, calm, still creatures. They don't do a lot when they're chilling. But they are doing a lot.
So hi Zoe, thank you for joining. Also,
hi Zoe.
Zoe made all of our really great art. Yeah. Zoe made a lot of really great artwork for this, and just check out their art in general. Like,
Zoe's a fantastic make the artwork, artist. Jasmine, but let everybody use it, which is so generous. Like,
yes,
that was really kind.
What element, like earth, air, fire, water, would you associate with your sin? I think for lust, I would naturally associate that with fire.
Sloth is earth. 100%.
I feel like if we're going with the 4 base elements, for pride, I almost feel like I want to go air.
I was thinking air too.
I was thinking air, water, sort of time.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was at too.
Pride to me could feel very much like having a conversation with the Queen of Swords. Like she's very like, she's the auntie that's like, get your shit together. Like, get your shit, get your life. Versus I feel like gluttony is more like the Hilda. That's like, let's go have a cake, honey. Come on. Are you crying?
Pride is like knowing. It's like knowing, like I'm the shit. So pride, knowing, air.
Yes, I love that.
What other correspondence, if any, can you think of? Like colors, animals?
Purple for pride, easily. Purple for pride is where I'm at for sure.
I would want to say red for lust, but I feel like I would put red with wrath. Like, I don't know. And I don't know if pink is really, I mean, pink
I think hot pink is a perfectly lusty color.
Yeah.
Like just that hot pink girl. That
Mhm.
speaks lusty to me. Because who
Kink.
doesn't want that girl?
Right. And you got to keep your pink stun gun just in case they're in trouble. Double, double. Yeah, they ask them for the fries on the side. So, that too.
What do you think for sloth, Taya?
Well, I'm kind of like brown, but then I'm like, no, it's almost like pink. Because like to me, it's more of like I'm trying to take it more out of that like icky, sticky, mucky, blah, like. So it would almost be more like I think like a pink, like self-care, self-love, self. So I would
See
put
that.
it in a pink.
I've
In that case,
oftentimes,
I shouldn't use the sloth either. I should pick a different animal.
I think that's cute though. Sloth.
Yeah, like a baby pink
I love
sloth.
sloths. They're so cute.
I've also attributed like ice blue to sloth as well because I think it works really well in relation to sloth, especially if you attribute like the element or the temperature of cold to sloth, um, or ice or something like that.
And I would have gone hot with sloth.
Gone hot.
Because when I'm slothful,
Uh-huh.
I get in bed with my heated blanket and I crank it on preheat. And I lay under it until I'm sweating buckets. And then I'm like, ah. So to
I
me,
see
sloth
that.
is hot.
I see that. And I guess for me, it would be a little different. But then again, sin is personal.
Yeah.
For
But I can see
me,
cold too.
yeah, for me, it's like I keep my dark little room here like frigid. Because I prefer to be in the cold. I'm most comfortable when I'm cold. And when I'm being my version of slothful, usually I'm in a cold space where I can like have a little blanket, maybe, and some snacks.
Snacks. Yeah.
Snacks. But yeah, no. And that's the thing is like what sloth is to you is going to be different to me and Jasmine. And I think that's what's so cool about this challenge is that we can all have these different views about what these sins manifest as.
I like you saying blue for sloth though, because I'm like, that leads into kind of like the depression and having the blues angle.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
I will say one of the things that I loved about the art that Zoe did for this challenge is I feel like all of the colors that Zoe chose for the graphics really hit the nail on the head for the different sins.
I guess she chose blue for sloth too. Ooh.
Yeah, I think it's kind of cool. Like, I think I'm following almost everyone who's doing this challenge. And I think that there's someone who's doing at least one of each. I was worried that some of the sins might get more love than others sins. And I think it's also it says a lot that a lot of people right now are working with pride because I think that's something that like we as a people need so much of right now is like taking more pride in ourselves. Pride would definitely probably be this year at least the most popular, but we do have someone pretty much working on every type of sin. So I kind of like the idea of having like book of shadow pages, right? And you have like the image of the sin, you have what the sin likes, very much like kind of building a Pokedex of servitors crafted out of sin, like, and just being able to call up one of your besties, like, oh, this is a situation for Wrath. Wait till Wrath hears about this. Or being like, oh my God, I've got to call Pride. Like, I know I got to call her. Because I feel like when I think of Pride and I think of like the tarot, I definitely think she would be a Queen of Swords or a King of Swords. Like,
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Hey, you're good with tarot. Who would sloth be?
Ooh.
Probably like a knight, since knights represent action. So maybe like a Knight of Pentacles.
I was going to say, yeah, who's the slow knight?
Or I was going to say Page of Pentacles.
A Page of Pentacles, that youthfulness, like.
Yeah.
Or Queen of Pentacles. I definitely see Pentacles. Yeah. I mean, I could see a sloth Queen of Pentacles being very like, you almost get lured out to some sort of fae-like song and you like get intoxicated by like the mist that's in the surrounding area and it makes you kind of sleepy and she's like, here to lay you out. You know what I mean? Get you some sleepy time tea, relax, quiet your mind, and then you just black out in the mushroom field. Like,
That sounds like a great evening.
People just find you, just like out in the middle of
And
the
you just
field, and they're like, "Oh, so
yeah,
slothful."
yeah. Like I could so see sloth as like one of those hypnotizing fey like entities that like is here to quiet and turn off your mind.
Yeah.
Sloth's like, thank you for listening. 666 radio.
Love that. Love that.
I would say wands for sure. Maybe like a king or queen or a page, any of them really. Or the devil card, because I think that's heavily associated with chastity as well and like restrictions with lust.
I think the Empress and the Emperor are great examples for pride.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So hopefully by the end of this, y'all, we're going to have 7 pages for our witchy scrapbook where we'll have like, you know, if you want to take someone else's creation, if they're posting it as part of the challenge, you can take someone else's and have all 7 sins that you can call upon in your times of need, overcoming some of these terrible virtues.
And if you guys would like to know about how this challenge has affected me, for example, I have a really good example. So I suffer from a lot of neurospicy issues. And one of the major issues that I suffer from, along with anxiety and depression, is massive executive dysfunction.
Oh.
Through my invocations with pride, which I've kept pretty personal, but I have been doing the challenge. Through my invocations of pride, since I've been doing this, I've been overcoming a lot of my executive dysfunction. I've been keeping my spaces clean. I've been, you know, doing the things that I need to do as a person on a daily basis. I've been productive, but not to my detriment, because I'm doing them for me, not for anyone else.
So interesting, because I'm neurospicy too. And that was exactly why I wanted to work with sloth, because I know people look at me and think sloth, and that really bothers me. And I'm like, I need to just be cool with sloth. And I've gone like the other way with like, I'm like accepting the executive dysfunction and just accepting that like it's okay. It's not, you know, maybe it's slothful, but that's how my life is, and that's okay.
I
Because
love
it's not
that.
for anybody else to decide what's best for my life.
Exactly. I love that.
But it's interesting. We both were working kind of on the same thing, but taking it in different directions. I like that.
Yeah, I was really just torn between working with pride or working with lust. But I think per my spicy seasonal depression, that's at its worst right now. It's always terrible in the spring for me. It's not so much the winter.
That's so
I
cool.
just thought, well, I feel like pride could be a great girl to call for like a little antidepressant boost, right? Because pride, I feel like, would be like, girl, get your ass up and take a shower, bathe yourself. I feel like pride would be like that. Like, have some pride in yourself, honey.
Exactly.
But I feel like lust is more like, I think of lust as like desire. And I feel like lust would be like, oh, let's go do this. Let's go enjoy this. Like, let's really enjoy it. Let's like really savor it, you know? Like,
Lust for life.
yes, yes.
Here's a song. A really old song, probably before your time, Jasmine. From Train Spotting. What was that song, guys? Help me out here.
I don't know it. I'll have to check it out.
Oh my gosh, I haven't seen that movie in so long.
It's like
That's
Lust
a good
for
one.
Life is like the line from the song.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Do you guys have like really any closing thoughts about the virtues at all? I mean, I'm enjoying the Black Lent. I think like by the end of it, we should all have basically a Book of Shadows ritual designed on invoking the spirit of that sin, since you're invoking it via the poem, you're giving it a vessel to possess and an image out of your own likeness of that sin, you're giving it offerings, you're working with it to better your life. Like it's really kind of a whole sin summoning like ritual.
That's why we have to do this every year for 7 years now, so that by the end of 7 years we can have worked
With each one. Yeah, I'm down
I
for this to
also
be
like
like a
that.
tradition.
I
So
like
down.
that a lot.
And I think just in closing, like the virtues are just as toxic as the sins, right? Like anything taken to an extreme isn't good.
Everything possesses duality, and that includes the sins and the virtues.
Yes,
There are good
everything.
things about all of them. There are bad things about all of them. It's all in how you approach these things. These are all social constructs, and as witches, we can bend those things.
Yes.
Yeah, and to me, like subverting that is a huge part of it. And a big distinction to me between them is like, to me, the sins are our humanity. Like the sins are our ego. They're our humanity. They're what makes us ourselves. I feel like they're natural animal instincts. Like to me, the virtues are not natural or earthly or human like at all. Like it's a completely thing that goes against like how our species is just hardwired. Like, not saying that we're not capable of kindness, but I don't really believe that true, genuine kindness or like true charity is really anyone's natural state of being.
Right.
Like, you know, I think it's more fluid than that. But yeah, I really appreciate you both, um, you know, talking about sin and these virtues. It's probably about time that we wrap this up. Um, Next week on the 8th, I should be having Madame Fortune on, who is a really great demonologist. Highly recommend their TikTok. Madame Fortune and I, we did a kind of like private kiki over on Patreon where we were just kind of chatting, getting to know each other. And I think that we're going to have some really exciting conversations this upcoming Wednesday, March 8th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on my channel. And definitely check out their TikTok. Um, Also, y'all definitely check out Taya's recent sloth video talking about the patriarchy. Like, there's some really good information in there. I think you did a really good job with that video.
And my poems in there.
I love it.
If you haven't already, please go over to Taya's channel and subscribe because she is a fantastic witch.
10s across the board. Okay, I think that that's it. So,
I've
yeah.
got one more thing.
Oh,
I've
yeah,
got
go
one
ahead.
more plug.
Go ahead.
One more plug. If you are interested in paranormal investigation, look up Midwest Spirits on YouTube. I have just joined a paranormal investigation group. We have a few videos out already. And I would love it if you would go check it out, subscribe, and join us for our little spooky adventures.
Please. And make sure you comment on one of the videos, Qayin. It can be a fun little game between us all that you are now in the ghost hunting online team of the Midwest Spirits. Like from this video, comment like Qayin. So it can be like our kind of thing, guys. Like,
You guys have all the fun stuff in the States, I swear to God.
Come join us. We'd love to have you.
We're starting a petition to fly Taya out for at least a minimum of a week. So send the M&Ms and the petitions to get Taya to the States. Okay, guys, we're going to end this. I'm going to wrap this up. Anything else? Okay, so thank you both for coming on. Thank you, everyone in the chat. Hellbound Heathen, Bougie, Mikey, Marie, Nocturnal. It's really good to see all of you. Sage, Zoe, thank you again so much for making the art for this. Definitely go check out Zoe and Fairney. And blessed be to everyone. And we will see you in hell.